Born to Annoy, A Dawning of Awareness. Chapter 11. Rose Hill, Marple. My week with the Bateses passed all too soon, and it was time to make my journey to my new home. The bike had been left at Denton to be taken to Marple in the removal van. I had to travel by train into Manchester's London Road station, and from there embark on a train to Rose Hill Station, Marple. The new address, 47 Claremont Avenue, Rose Hill, was in my pocket, along with instructions how to proceed from the railway. Beattie, who was now 56, had decided to give up the shop and retire. This, or so she told me, was to be their final move, the retirement home of their dreams. The railway journey passed without incident, and soon we were steaming out of Romley Station and over a viaduct crossing the River Goy. We were running parallel with the foothills of the Pennines on our left, and I can remember being delighted as we passed over the viaduct, because looking out of the right-hand window, I could see a canal running parallel with, but slightly below the railway track, which too crossed high above the river on a stone-built aqueduct. Then we crossed the canal and fought right at Marple Junction signal box, and the carriage wheels were squealing on a tight curve before steaming into Rose Hill Station. I was soon up the access slope from the platform and onto Stockport Road. Turn left over the railway bridge, past the railway pub, and then cross the road and carry straight on. I found myself on a highway lined with semi-detached houses on either side. They had moderately large front gardens, and trees full of blossom. Cherry, I think, although it was rather late in the year for cherry, lined the road. It had just rained, and everything smelt fresh. Ignore the first two roads on the right, then turn into Marina Drive. Now the houses on my left were as before, but bungalows lined the pavement on the left. First left into Claremont Avenue, second bungalow on the left. I'd arrived. I stood at the open double wrought iron gates, weighing up my new abode. It was the right-hand part of a semi-detached, a large window to the left adjacent to our neighbour, and a smaller rounded window at the right-hand corner. I was soon to discover this was my bedroom, and the larger room on the left my aunt's. The bungalow only had 2 bedrooms. Evidently my aunts were anticipating me flying the nest sooner or later. A small front garden full of rose bushes in bloom. A tarmac drive up the side of the house with a garage at the end. A low boundary fence and a similar drive next to it. The house next door on the right-hand side wasn't a bungalow, however. I began to walk towards the garage. The main door to number 47 was fronted by a small porch set into the wall with a curved roof. The door itself was glazed with frosted glass. Next was another window, again with frosted glass, presumably the bathroom. Then another window, the kitchen. I walked around the back, a large long garden with apple trees, and what turned out to be an old hen hutch. I discovered the bungalow was L-shaped, the kitchen sticking out further than the rest of the rooms. The kitchen door was ajar, and I could hear Dolly singing. Like Dad, she had a beautiful voice, and used it to good effect when doing domestic chores. Most of her repertoire consisted of Irish traditional folk songs, Molly Malone, Danny Boy, and Galway Bay being favourites. These were occasionally interspersed with show songs from Hollywood musicals. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. Yes, I can't sing, don't worry about it, I won't continue. I realised the large window I was now looking at from the garden was the living room. Beattie sat in an armchair dozing off. I knocked on the window, and she almost jumped out of her skin. Dolly appeared at the kitchen door, a big grin on her face, a pot towel in her hands. Come on, Malc, you're just in time. Put the kettle on, we're dying for a brew. They'd already had dinner, but Dolly had saved some for me. Roast lamb, roast potatoes, boiled potatoes, dark green cabbage, carrots, runner beans, and rich dark gravy. Delicious. Dolly was a wonderful cook, whereas Beattie was merely a novice, and only allowed in the kitchen on a Sunday to mash the cabbage. Afterwards, I asked my aunts if they'd had time to explore the area. Not really, they informed me, but we're on the edge of fields. I asked them if they fancied a walk. Beatty declined, but Dolly was all for it. Let me get me coat and scarf. It's boiling out there, just put a cardi on. Eventually she'd found some sensible shoes, and we were on our way. We'll walk down to the bottom of the avenue and onto Hilltop Drive. It leads to Marple Hall. Marple Hall. It sounded intriguing. She gave my elbow a nudge, her arm crooked. I threaded my arm through hers, feeling all grown up. At the end of the road we turned right, and shortly afterwards we were passing between two tall stone pillars, which must have once supported impressive gates, onto an unmade track wide enough for a carriage. Open pasture land lay on either side, fenced off from the track, which was lined with tall mature trees, sycamore and copper beech. At some point this must have been the drive to somebody's ancestral home, I thought to myself. After a few hundred yards, a tall red sandstone building hove into view, with impressive mullioned windows. Marple Hall, Dolly informed me, once the abode of hanging Judge Bradshaw. He sounds sinister. Who was he? One of the heroes of the Civil War. After the victory of the parliamentary cause, he signed the death warrant for the execution of Charles I. We walked around the back of the building and sat on an old tree trunk, gazing down through the trees. The hall stood on a plateau, from which a steep wooded slope descended a good 50 feet. The Goyt meandered through the flat valley below. A rustle overhead caught our attention. A red squirrel ran along an overhead branch. Another soon joined it. We watched their acrobatics as they chased each other from bough to bough. It brought back memories of my granddad and our visits to Lyme Park. Come on, Dolly said. Beatty will be wondering where we've got to. Instead of walking back the way we had come, we took another track, again lined with trees, but only on the left-hand side. Soon we passed a small pond lined with rushes on our right, and then the track curved, bringing us once more onto a paved road, Marple Hall Drive, which was crossed by Claremont Avenue. We turned right onto the latter, and were soon back to number 47, having walked in a circle. I couldn't fault the new environment I found myself in, and once again only one row of houses separated me from open land. Whatever faults Dolly and Beatty might have had, they certainly knew how to choose an interesting place to live in. As soon as we returned, Beatty asked me what I thought of the area. It'll do. Whose turn is it to make the tea? Yours, Dolly said. Later, whilst Beatty made our evening meal, tinned red salmon and salad, Dolly showed me my bedroom. Then she explained that the sofa in the living room converted to a bed, and, if we had visitors, I would have to give up my room to whoever was staying. Visitors? I responded. What visitors? Well, Auntie Edna for a start. I thought. I suppose I wouldn't mind Auntie Edna taking over my bed. I wondered if she liked to take tea before rising in the morning. Well, I can almost sense your shock, dear reader, but I was a helpful lad, and I was good at making tea, and I was now 13 years of age. The next 5 weeks before I commenced studies at my new school were spent in exploring the area further, during the course of which I made 2 new friends. The first was John Townsend. John was about my age but much taller, a fair-haired lad, the son of Basil Townsend, the tenant farmer who farmed the land of Marple Hall Estate. He had a sister, Carol, who was about a year younger, and they lived at nearby Dambank Farm with their parents and grandparents. Carol had a friend who had a pony, Valerie Crossley. Valerie was dark-haired, and I thought her beautiful. I began to hang around whenever she was at the farm, and then discovered she exercised her pony around the grounds of Marple Hall. We soon became friends, and I even got to ride her pony, but our friendship didn't develop any further, despite all my efforts. However, through Valerie, I met her brother Nigel, and he, like me and John Townsend, was a cyclist. The 3 of us, Nigel, John and me that is, soon became inseparable. Over the next few years we'd cycle together, go to the cinema together, work on the farm together, begin drinking together, chase girls together, and almost catch them together. One of the few things we didn't do was go to school together. They were pupils at the Willows, a secondary modern in Marple, whilst I was now a grammar school boy. The Rosehill area of Marple was quite compact, covering the area immediately around the station, with its western border ending at the bottom of a steep hill, dam bank on the main Stockport Road, and its junction with Dooley Lane, which led to Otterspool, Romley and Bredbury. The Goyt formed the northern border. The bulk of this area was open land farmed by John's dad, mainly pasture for their Frisian cows, with some potatoes, cabbage, onions, lettuce and barley, if my memory is correct. They also kept a couple of pigs and a few hens and geese. The houses either side of Stockport Road were, in the main, built during the 1930s. All were semi-detached and all had gardens, front and rear. The only shops were on Stockport Road opposite the Railway Inn, a general store and a post office, the main shops being in Marple village centre. A small pre-war council estate lay on the opposite side from us, hidden away behind the grander houses lining the main road. Nigel and Valerie lived in a privately owned house, which occupied the end of a road occupied by council houses. Marple itself was much older, originally having been a cotton village, and now growing into a small, bustling town, attracting commuters who worked in Stockport and Manchester, the former serviced by a regular bus service and the latter by the railway. There were in fact two stations, Marple on the Manchester to Buxton line, and Rosehill on the Manchester to Macclesfield line. This was one of the main reasons Beattie and Dolly had decided to live there. Although Dolly had the car, she wouldn't use it to travel to work. This, then, was to be the base for all my leisure activities for the next 3 years, leading up to the time when I was due to enter the world of work.